Hilchos Kiddush Hachodesh Perek Sheni, the laws of sanctifying the new month, chapter 2. Yesterday we learned that what makes Rosh Chodesh? Two things. First of all, the moon meets the sun in its orbit around the earth, and then becomes visible in the sky the night following that. But it's not just the physical process that makes Rosh Chodesh. Witnesses have to come to Beit Din and testify that they saw the new moon. And only if the witnesses are telling the truth, that's when Beit Din decides that today is the new month. So, in the 14th book of the Rambam, the last book of the Rambam, there's a whole section of halachot called Hilchot Edut, the laws of testimony. And over there the Rambam discusses who is a kosher witness, which relatives are not kosher witnesses, how the Beit Din would interrogate the witnesses. It's a whole 22 chapters on the laws of Edut. But over here, because such an important part of making the calendar is the testimony of the witnesses, so the Rambam tells us the special laws that were related to Edut Hachodesh, special laws that are related to testimony of making the new month. And that's what today's chapter is about. So we begin Halacha Aleph. Ein kosher le'edus hachodesh ela shnei anoshim ksherim. The only people that are kosher to say testimony about the new month is two kosher men, hara'uyin lahoyid b'chol davar v'davar, that would typically be allowed to testify about anything. In the Torah it says, v'amdu shnei ha'anashim, it has to be men that are witnesses, and there's a whole list of things that makes them kosher. Again, it's going to be explained in the 14th book. They can't be a wicked person, they can't have many averot on their record. So basically, whatever qualifies as a kosher aid, the kosher witness, typically is the only people that are kosher for this. Avol nashim va'avodim, but women and slaves, harehin kishar psuli eidos ve'ein me'idin. They're like anybody else who's disqualified to say testimony, and they cannot say testimony about the new month. So even if a woman or a slave saw the new moon, they saw the new moon, they can't go to Beit Din, and it won't help. Even if they come, the calendar will not be decided based on them. But there is an exception. Of uvnoi sharo es hayareach. What if a father and son were standing together, and they both saw the new moon? Yelchu lebeis din lahoyed. The Rambam says they should go to court to say testimony. Now, they're relatives. Typically, two relatives are not acceptable as witnesses. So why should a father and son go together to court? Says the Rambam, loy mipnei she'edus hachodesh ksheira b'kreivim, not because testimony about the new month is kosher with relatives. They're still going to be disqualified. But the more witnesses we have in the court, the better. Let's say one of them will be interrogated, and it'll come out that he's disqualified. He didn't see the moon properly, or whatever it might be. Or because he'll discover that he's a thief, or something like that would disqualify a witness. Different averot disqualify a witness. So let's say the father and son go to court, and one of them is discovered to be a guy with a no good record, and so he's no good. The second one, the father or the son, the kosher one, will now be able to combine with somebody else who saw the moon, and together you'll have two people. Imagine if the father and son would stay home. They'd say, you know what, anyways we're relatives, there's no point. But maybe there's one other guy in Jerusalem who saw the moon, and all he needs is one other partner to partner up with him. Therefore, they should better both go, and whoever will be acceptable will be acceptable. Anybody who is disqualified from saying testimony, even only rabbinically, even though he would be acceptable, kosher according to biblical law, he is also disqualified from saying testimony about the new month. You have to be fully kosher witness to take part in the testimony of the new month. Would they get paid? They wouldn't get paid, but we'll soon see there was an incentive. They wanted people to come to Jerusalem to say testimony about the new moon. We'll see how they would incentivize them. Beis. Here's another exception about the testimony of the new moon. Din Torah she'ein medaktikin be'edus hachodesh. The biblical law is that we don't have to be so precise when it comes to the testimony of the new moon. What does it mean we don't have to be precise? For example, sha'afilu kiddush hachodesh al pi edim. Let's say the court sanctified the new moon based on the testimony of witnesses, v'nimtzu zaymimin be'edozu, and it turns out that they are what's called edim zomimin. Edim zomimin means witnesses whose veracity was shown to be false, but not because somebody argued on their testimony, but rather somebody argued on they themselves. In other words,
characters.
No. In other words, let's say two people come and say, I saw Reuven kill Shimon in Sherman Oaks on Ventura Boulevard at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, two people come and say, I don't know if Reuven killed Shimon, but I know that you guys weren't in Sherman Oaks at 8 o'clock in the morning. You were with us in the city having breakfast. That's an Eid Zomem. He's not arguing on the testimony, he's arguing on the witness. So over here too, let's say the witness says, we were in Beersheba, we saw the moon on this night. Two other witnesses come and say, I don't know if you saw the moon, but you were not in Beersheba. That for sure, you were with us having lunch or having dinner. So even if the witnesses turn out to be false in that way, harezeh mikudash, the actions of the court stand in place. The new month was sanctified, it's sanctified. We're not so careful with the testimony of the new month. Lefichach, therefore, another thing that happened because of that, hayu barishayna mekablin eidos hachodesh mikol adam Yisrael. The court didn't really care who was coming to say testimony. They would take the testimony from anybody, any Jew, as long as he was a Jewish male. Shekol Yisrael bechezkas kashrus, because we have a presumption that every Jew is kosher, ad sheyivada lecha shezeh pasul, till you know that he is disqualified, and that's the saying in English, innocent until proven guilty. So with a Jew, it's the same thing, kosher until proven non-kosher. So the court didn't care who walked into court. You hear, you say you saw the moon, good. Mishakilkalu habaytusim. But then there was a movement of people who were trying to get back at the rabbis. They were trying to ruin the rabbinic system. They were called the Tzdukim, the Sadducees, the Baitusim, the Bethusians. And what did they do? They would literally hire people to go to court and say, we saw the new moon, just so the court would set up the Rosh Chodesh on a different day and mess up the calendar. And really, these witnesses didn't see the moon. So what did they do? Hiskinu, the court enacted, Shalo yekablu beis din eidos hachodesh, that the high court is no longer going to accept testimony for the new month, ella me'edim shemakirin beis din oisan shehin ksherim. Only from witnesses who the court knows to be kosher people, and that now they will interrogate and they will investigate the testimony. In other words, biblically, they weren't careful about testimony, they weren't careful about the people. But because these people, this movement began to ruin the system, so they said, you know what, that's it. We're only taking testimony from people that we know, and we're going to go through the process of investigation. Says the Rambam Halacha Gimel, Lefichach, therefore, Im lo yiyu beis din yoidim es ha'edim, shelo es hayareach, if the court did not know. These witnesses who walked in saying they saw the moon, there's no database, right? There's no computer you can check, no catalog. So what do? Mishalchin anshe ha'ir, sheniraba, im ha'edim, shero, edim acherim. The people of the city from where these witnesses come would send other witnesses, shemizakin noisan lebezdin, whose job it was to make these people look kosher in the eyes of the court. Umaydiya noisan she'elu ksherim him, and they would tell them these are kosher people. V'achakach mekablim him, and then the court would listen to what they had to say. So it became a bit tedious. If you knew that the court didn't know who you are, you have to bring witnesses to prove who you are. Dalid. Let's talk a little bit about the investigation that the witnesses would be put through. Beis din mechashvin badrachim sheha itztagninin mechashvin bahem. The court, who had among them some great mathematicians, great astronomers, would calculate with astronomers' calculations. V'yoidin halevana kashetera b'chodesh zeh. They would know that when this moon, when it's going to be sighted on this month, im tia b'tzvayin hashemesh oy b'dreima. Will it be to the north of the sun or to the south? V'im tia rechava oy ktsara. Will it be wider crescent or narrower crescent? And where will the points of the crescent be facing? Depending on what time of year you're in, the moon would be either northerly or southerly relative to the sun. So you can only see the new moon after sunset. That blue line over there is like, below the horizon. So the sun already dips below the horizon. Now you have the moon left. What will the moon look like? The Beit Din could calculate that in advance. They could know which way the moon is going to look. That's why in the other picture you see here, they had on the wall of the court, they had different frames with different shapes of the moon. The Talmud says Rabbi Gamliel's court had a whole board of these types of moons. And some of them were actually false realities. Like it could never happen. Like this picture could never happen. You can't have a crescent facing inward towards the sun. That's just not how the moon works. The light doesn't reflect that way. But he would have it up on his wall. And this way they could interrogate the witnesses to see if they were telling the truth. So the court would tell in advance how the moon would look. And when the witnesses would come to testify, they would check them with these questions. They would say, no, how did you see it? Which direction did you see the moon? Was it in the north or in the south? To which direction were the points of the crescent facing? How high estimate did the moon look to you? Was it low in the sky? Was it high in the sky? How wide was the crescent? If their words are aligned with that which we figured out mathematically, we accept their testimony. But if we don't find their words to be aligned, then of course we cannot accept their testimony and it's considered to be false, and we go on to the next set of witnesses. Hey, Amru ha'edim, if the witnesses say, Re'inuhu b'mayim, you know what, we didn't see the moon actually in the sky. We saw a reflection in the water. That's how we saw the moon. We were looking down into the river, and we saw the moon in the water. Or we were looking into the clouds, and we saw the moon. We didn't really see the moon, we just saw a bunch of clouds with the moon inside. We thought it was the moon. Or we saw the moon through a window, through glass. Ein zuri'iyah. The halacha is, or they saw it partially in the sky and partially in the clouds, partially in the sky, partially in the water, partially in the sky, partially through glass. That's not considered a sighting. And the High Court could not sanctify a new month based on that. Why? Because maybe you didn't see the actual moon. You see a reflection of the moon in the water, but look in this picture, there's no actual moon in the sky. So they probably just saw something took a shape of a moon in the water, or the shape of the moon in the clouds. Omar echad, if one witness says, to me the moon looked like it was 2 stories high in the sky. Second witness says, it was 3 floors high. Mitzdarfen, they can combine. Because 2-3 floors, not such a big difference. Omar ha'echad, but if one witness says, I saw the moon about 3 stories high in the sky. Second guy says 5, ein mitzdarfen, they don't combine because that discrepancy is too big. However, we don't make these witnesses false. If there's a third witness who testifies like one of the 2 witnesses, we combine them. Or even if he's 1 story off. If a third guy comes and says, I saw 4 stories high, and the 3 and 4 stories guy can combine. Vav. Amru, what if the witnesses says, Ri'inuhu b'lei kavana. We saw the moon without intending to. We were walking down the street and from the corner of our eye we saw the moon. The kevan she's bainananu bay. Then we looked again, we did a double take, just to make sure, we wanted to do it with the intention to see it, to be able to testify later. Shuv lei ri'inu. Now we don't see it anymore. It happens sometimes. You're walking down the street, you think you see something, you look again, boom, it's not there. So of course, ein zu eidos. This is not an acceptable testimony. And we cannot sanctify the new month based on this. Shema ovim niskashru v'niru kalavana. Because maybe while they were walking, there were some clouds that tied together and looked like the moon. The kalu v'hol cholem. By the time they did a double take, the clouds had dispersed, and there was no new moon to be seen, of course. Okay, now let's just quickly review a principle we learned yesterday. The new moon can only be sighted right after sunset. Because by the molad, by the time of conjunction, the moon and the sun meet. Then the moon continues traveling a little bit eastward, past the sun, so that when the sun sets in the west, below the horizon, this is just before sunset, this is now after sunset. Sun is gone, and that tiny crescent of the moon can possibly be visible at this time of the day. Now, if the moon is going to be visible at this time, there's no way for the moon to be visible the night before. Because that means that the night before, the moon was too close to the sun, only now it got far enough to be seen. So what if the following scenario plays out? It says the Rambam, Amru Eidim. 2 witnesses come to court and they say the following. Ri'inuhu b'yom tisha ve'esrim Shacharis b'mizrach. On the 29th morning, we saw the moon in the east. Koydem shatal ha'shemesh. Before sunrise. In other words, relative to the sun, it was more westward. It rose before the sun. Uri'inuhu arvis b'mayra b'leil shleishim. And then the next night, we see the moon in the west after sunset. Now, one of the 2 is an impossibility. The moon cannot be seen before sunrise on one side of the sky and after sunset on the second side of the sky during this time of the month. It's possible other times of the month, but not this time of the month. Either in the morning it disappeared and in the night you can see it, Or in the morning it was there, in the night you can't see it. So here the Rambam says, Harei elu ne'emonim. We actually believe them. We believe the second part of their statement, and we sanctify the new month based on this sighting, because they say they saw it in the right time. We saw it on the night after the 29th day, the 30th night, after sunset. That's the proper time to see the moon. And that sighting which they say, that we saw the moon in the morning before sunrise, we don't even care about it. We don't have to take responsibility for what they saw in the morning. It could be anything. It's certainly that the clouds, they just tied up in some formation, and again like this, and it looked like the moon, and that's it. The same thing would happen if, on the night of the 30th, when it's the proper time to see the moon, the witnesses say we saw it. But then the next night, when now you should for sure be able to see the moon, because if you saw it last night, for sure you're going to see it tonight, all of a sudden now it's not seen. Doesn't make the witnesses false. The original witnesses stay believed. Because as the court, we are only responsible for whether the moon was seen on the night of the 30th, and that's it. The fact that the next night it wasn't seen, maybe there was clouds covering it, maybe something else happened. Bottom line, on the proper night, was it seen? Yes. If it was seen, and we have testimony and they're trustworthy, make the new month. Says the Rambam halacha zayin, ketzad mekabel in eidos hachodesh. How exactly was testimony for the new month accepted? Kol mi sheroi lehoid, shero es hayareach, bale beis din. Anybody in Israel, nobody should count on their friends. If you saw the new moon, come to Jerusalem to the court. Ubeis din machnisam neisam kulam lemakem echad. The court would bring them all in to one place, and you know what attracts Jews? Good food. Ve'oisim lahen su'udas gedailes. They made a big meal. So people should keep on coming. Because think about it. Imagine you come 1 month and you see 40 people. So next month you're going to go, you know what? There's 40 people that saw the new moon. Nobody needs me. And then if everybody says that, then nobody comes. So what's the incentive? A big party. Talmud calls this place Bet Ya'azek. It was a courtyard near Jerusalem. Everybody would gather over here and they had these massive meals prepared for them. Now, you have all these witnesses. The zug shabar rishayin, baitkin oisan rishayin. The pair of witnesses which came first come, first serve. Witnesses who came first were brought into the court first, and they were checked first, with the investigations that we said. That picture from before, the picture of the moon, how did you see it, which way, da. In Jewish law, we don't interrogate witnesses together. It's one at a time. We bring in the older one, and we ask him our questions. Or some say gadol means the greater one, greater in stature. Yeah, you could do that. The point is, it was separate interrogation. And you ask him questions. If his words match the mathematical calculations that we have, we bring in his friend. If their words match, their testimony is accepted. Now, you have 40 people waiting outside that also came to say the new moon, but already the first pair is already good. So what do they do? So the court would bring them in. All the other pairs, they would ask them, some basic questions. Mickey Mouse questions. Not because they needed them, the first pair was already good. So they shouldn't leave frustrated. This way they'll be going to be used to coming. Now, that didn't always happen. Sometimes the first pair was disqualified, then you needed the second pair. So of course, sometimes it could happen that everybody was needed. But if the first pair was accepted, we don't stop it right there. We still call everybody in, we be nice to them, and this way they come back. They come later.
After that already got like a true...
When do they start eating? Yeah. No, before. The party begins before. Yeah, the party starts before. While everybody's partying...
It should be opposite. It should be after they've got the correct answer from a genuine, truthful witness.
Then you make a party?
Then they eat. Otherwise they will wait. Otherwise they could just show up with a lot of noch schleppers there.
So even guys who didn't see the moon. They just come for fun. There's always going to be Jews that come. JFK, just for Kiddush they come. Exactly. Okay. After the whole process is finished, after the testimony is accepted, everybody would gather together, and the Reish Beis Din, the head of the court, Oimer Mekudash, he would get out there and scream, sanctified. It was super important, this declaration. He had to say it. That's how the new month became the new month. V'chol ha'am ha'inim acharav, mekudash, mekudash. And everybody answers after him, it's sanctified, it's sanctified. You can only sanctify a new month with a court at least of three judges. You can only make calculations with 3 judges. There's no such thing as one genius who does it all by himself. You have to have the other opinions. We only sanctify a new month which was seen in its proper time. In other words, on the night of the 30th. Because if that night it wasn't seen, the next night is automatically Rosh Chodesh. You don't need to sanctify it. It's already there. And you can only sanctify the new month by day. In other words, the next day, after the moon was sighted, that's when they interrogated the witnesses, and that's when they would make the day holy. If they sanctified it by night, it's not sanctified. Even if the moon was so obviously sighted that everybody saw it, the high court, all the Jewish people saw it. But the high court didn't have a chance to say sanctified till the next night came in, night of the 31st, or let's say they interrogated the witnesses. And there wasn't enough time to say the word sanctified before sunset, and that's it, the night came in. We missed it. They saw the moon, we missed it. We don't sanctify the new month, and the month becomes a pregnant month, a full month, and the new month only begins on day 31. So the previous month is 30 days. Even though the moon was seen on the proper night, the night of the 30th. Why, says the Rambam? Because the sighting alone doesn't make the new month. It's the court, when they say sanctified, that's when it becomes the new month. The Rebbe has a whole talk on this, why that is. Like, what do you mean? If it's all about the physical, like if it's about seeing the new moon, so who cares if they said it, they didn't say it, the new moon is there. I'll tell you what the Rebbe says in a moment. Tes. Ra'u beis din atzman b'soif yom tisha v'esrim. What if the Bet Din themselves were sitting on the balcony, discussing if the new moon's going to be seen? Boom, they look up, they see the new moon. No witnesses, they saw it themselves. If no stars came out yet on the night of the 30th, beis din oimrim mekudosh. The court themselves, based on their sighting, since it's still a little bit considered day, they can say mekudosh and sanctify the new month, sha'adayin yomhu, because it's still day. And they won't need to interrogate the witnesses tomorrow. They can already say it today and know that Rosh Chodesh will be tomorrow. But if they only saw it at night, the night of the 30th, after 2 stars already came out, so they can't just say mekudash because it's by night. You can only say mekudash by day. Lemachar, the next day, forget the witnesses. Bring 2 more judges in who didn't see the new moon. Make them part of the court. Bring 2 judges, put them next to one of the 3 who saw the moon. And the other 2 judges who saw the moon, let them stand up and be witnesses in front of this new court of 3. And the 3-membered court will make the new month sanctified, and you don't have to have witnesses. If a high court sanctified a new month, and there was a mistake, whether they were inadvertently unaware of some factors, and they made the new month holy, bein mutin, or they were misled, bein anusim, or whether they were forced. And the Rebbe explains this means they were forced by circumstance. We're going to see in chapter 18, there are some circumstances that would force a court to make the new month on a different day, even though there was no moon sighting. So even if they were forced by circumstance, and actually there was no conjunction, the moon and sun didn't come together yet, or they did, and the moon wasn't sighted, harez them mekudash. The new month is sanctified. And everybody has to follow and set their calendars with the holidays based on the day which the court sanctified. In the Talmud, there's a 4th option of it's called mizidin. They were purposeful. The Rebbe says that Rambam took that out because we don't believe halachically that a court would be purposely, violating the calendar. Maybe they were misled, maybe they were forced by circumstance, but not purposeful.
But can they backdate it?
No. You can only sanctify it on the day. Afal pisha zeh shato. Even if a person knows they made a mistake, chayav lismech aleim, we must rely on them. She'ein adavar masur elo lahem, because the whole matter was handed over only to their jurisdiction. Umisha tziva lishmer Maimonides, hu tziva lismech aleim. The same God who tells us to keep the holidays told us to rely on the court to know when the holidays are. Shenemar, as it says, look at this, Asher tikru oisam the goymer. You have to call them. The high court calls the days. But look at the word, otam, in the Torah, can also be spelled as atem. You guys. You guys get to decide when the holidays are. Doesn't matter what people say, doesn't matter if you made a mistake. No matter if you said it, it's holy. And here again you have the question. The new month goes after the new moon. So what's this business of trusting the court? So the Rebbe explains a fascinating talk. You have to really understand the depth of creation. He says, the true Rosh Chodesh follows the spiritual molad. There's a spiritual rebirth of the moon. Many times we merit in this world and we see the reflection of it. Hashem arranges that the new moon physically should meet the sun at the same time that the new moon spiritually is being reborn. And in those months, Rosh Chodesh is set up in the proper time. But when the Beit Din makes a mistake, or looks to us like a mistake, in fact, they're aligning themselves with the true molad, the true spiritual rebirth of the moon, and it's not, because of whatever reason, it's not coming down in the physical world. But everything is aligned with the spiritual molad. And that's where the real Rosh Chodesh is taking place, and that's why we follow that day for setting up the new calendar.